The void between stars was never truly empty. Commander Vorgul of the Vorthak 3rd Battle Fleet knew this better than most. His armored fingers traced the tactical display, its silver-purple glow casting jagged reflections across his chitinous face. The holographic projection showed nothing but the endless dark. No ships, no energy signatures, no debris, just the cold, silent expanse of the Tarkis expanse, where the borders of the Vorthak Dominion met the uncharted wilds beyond. Yet the signal had been real. Gromnok, the fleet's lead xenotechnologist, stood rigid beside him, his 4 jointed arms folded behind his back. His ocular implants flickered as they processed the same empty scan results. It was there, he insisted, his voice a low, grating hum. A single transmission burst. Human origin, no encryption, no repetition, just a pulse. Vorgul's mandibles twitched. Humans were a curiosity, nothing more. The Dominion's archives dismissed them as fractured, chaotic, a young species still tearing at each other's throats in their cradle system. Their ships were crude, their weapons laughable. And yet, the signal had come from here. From nothing. Run the scan again, Vorgul ordered. The bridge crew obeyed, their armored forms moving with the mechanical precision of warriors bred for war. The Vorthak did not waste motion. Their ships were brutalist monoliths of dark steel and violet energy cores, their architecture designed for function, not beauty. Every console, every weapon, every bulkhead served a singular purpose: dominance. The scanners pulsed once more, bathing the void in silver-purple waves. Gromnok's claws tapped against his data slate. Perhaps a malfunction? A ghost echo from an old wreck? Vorgul exhaled through his secondary vents, the sound a hiss of controlled frustration. No, the humans are not subtle. If they were here, we would see them. Not on the scanners, not on the tactical display, but in the void itself. A single point of light winked into existence, hanging motionless against the black. No engine flare, no drive signature, just a presence. Gromnok's ocular implants dilated. Commander, Vorgul was already moving. Magnify. The display zoomed, resolution sharpening. It was a ship, but not like any human vessel the archives had recorded. No bulky hull, no crude propulsion arrays. This was sleek, a dagger of blackened alloy, its edges so sharp they seemed to cut the starlight around it. No markings, no insignia. Just a single, unblinking red light at its prow, like the eye of some ancient predator. And it was silent. No emissions, no heat, no power readings at all. As if it weren't there, Vorgul's spine stiffened. The Vorthak had fought wars against empires that spanned star clusters. They had crushed rebellions, glassed worlds, and stood unbroken against the mightiest fleets in known space. This was wrong. Open a channel, he commanded. The comm officer hesitated. Commander, Therese, nothing to open a channel to. The ship isn't broadcasting any. A click, static. Then, a voice, calm. Vorthak vessel. This is Colonel Victoria Vala of the Terran Singularity Corps. You are trespassing in a restricted zone. Gromnok's claws flexed. Singularity Corps. There are no records. Vorgul silenced him with a gesture. Colonel Vala, you are in violation of Dominion space. Power down your vessel and prepare to be boarded. A pause, then, negative. The word was flat. Final. Vorgul's blood ran cold. No human had ever refused a Vorthak command. Not once in 3 centuries of contact. Then the red light on the human ship pulsed once, and the void screamed. The scanners erupted in chaos. Energy spikes, gravimetric distortions, space itself warped around the black dagger, reality bending like a blade under pressure. And then, in the span of a single heartbeat, the human ship was gone. No jump signature, no displacement wake. Just gone. The bridge was silent. Gromnok's voice was barely a whisper. Commander, what was that? Vorgul stared at the empty space where the ship had been, For the first time in his long, brutal life, the Vorthak commander felt something unfamiliar. "Something old," he murmured. "Something we were meant to forget." And in the depths of the Tarkis expanse, the void watched back. Section Fe. The first mistake, the silence on the Stormfang's bridge, was absolute. Every Vorthak officer stood frozen at their stations, their silver-purple armor plates locked in rigid tension. The only movement came from the flickering tactical displays, their harsh violet light casting jagged shadows across the chamber. Vorgul's claws flexed against the command console, the alloy creaking under his grip. His secondary heart pounded in his chest, a deep rhythmic thrum that echoed the warship's own pulse. The human vessel, that sleek black dagger of a ship, had not just vanished. It had erased itself from existence without a trace. No energy surge, no warp signature, not even the faintest ripple in the quantum foam. Impossible. Gromnock's talons danced across his console, the holographic readouts reflecting in his wide, glassy eyes. His crest of metallic spines, normally rigid with pride, lay flat against his skull in submission. "Commander." His voice was a rasp, barely audible over the ship's ambient hum. The sensors detected nothing. No propulsion trail, no dimensional breach. "It's as if it was never there," Vorgul finished. A low, subsonic growl built in his chest. The Vorthak Dominion had ruled this sector for millennia. Their warships were unmatched, their technology honed through centuries of conquest. They had crushed empires, shattered fleets, and reduced entire species to dust beneath their armored boots. That single human ship had defied them with a single word. Vorgul's mind raced. The archives, the old texts, the forbidden histories locked deep within the dominions. Vaults, fragments of data, half erased, whispered of a time before the Vorthak ascendancy. A time when something else had prowled the stars, something the ancient seers had called the Hollow Ones. His claws tightened. "Gromnock," he said, his voice a blade of dark steel. "Pull the records from the Kethfer vaults, everything on pre-ascendancy contact, every scrap, every whisper." The scientist hesitated. "Commander, those files are restricted by the High Synod. To access them without clearance is—" Gromnock flinched, then bowed his head and obeyed. Vorgul turned back to the void. The human ship was gone, but its presence lingered like a wound in reality. That single, impossible act of defiance had shattered something fundamental. The unspoken truth every Vorthak knew in their bones. They were the masters of this galaxy. Now, something had looked back. Deep in the ship's core, the Stormfang's silver, purple energy reactors pulsed, their harsh light flickering, just once, as if in warning. Section Fe. The sphere speaks. The Stormfang's archives were not merely data repositories. They were tombs, layers of encrypted vaults, shielded by protocols older than the Vorthak ascendancy itself, pulsed with the same harsh silver, purple energy that powered their warships. Gromnock's claws trembled as he bypassed the final security lock, his neural interface flaring with warnings. The High Synod had buried these records for a reason. The moment the files unfolded in his mind, he understood why. Holograms flickered to life in the dim chamber, casting jagged violet shadows across the walls. Ancient surveillance feeds, distorted by time, showed things moving through dead cities, tall, skeletal figures with too many joints, their forms shifting like smoke. Their ships were wrong, asymmetrical, their edges bleeding into reality, as if refusing to fully exist. The Hollow Ones, Gromnock's breath hitched. The myths were real, the recordings were fragmented, but the devastation was clear. Entire fleets, Vorthak, Kethfer, even the long-extinct Zorathi, shattered like glass against those nightmare vessels. The Hollow Ones did not conquer, they unmade. They left behind husks of worlds where the very air had turned to poison, where the dead stood frozen in silent screams. A new file sealed behind a final encryption. Gromnak hesitated. His commander's order had been absolute, but this felt like prying open a grave. He activated it. The hologram resolved into a battle, not of ships, but of forces. A storm of silver, purple energy, the signature of Vorthak weaponry, clashed against something darker. And then, smooth, black, utterly featureless, it hung in the void, unmoved by the cataclysm around it. The Hollow One's ships fled from it. A voice, distorted beyond recognition, crackled through the recording. "You do not belong here." The sphere opened. Light, not silver, not violet, but something older erupted. The Hollow One's vessels dissolved into screaming particles. The feed cut out. Gromnak staggered back, his neural interface burning with residual static. His heart's pounded. That sphere, it had spoken. It had ended them. And now, the humans had sent one of their own. Vorgul's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Report." Gromnak turned. His crest spines flattened in instinctive dread. "Commander, we were wrong. The Hollow Ones were real, and something stopped them." He swallowed. Something that looked exactly like the human vessel. The chamber's lights flickered again. Not a warning this time, but a plea. The galaxy had forgotten its nightmares. Now they were awake. The command deck of the Void, Reaper hummed with the low, throbbing pulse of its silver-purple energy cores, their harsh light casting jagged shadows across the reinforced steel bulkheads. Vorgul stood motionless before the tactical display, his armored claws flexing in silent agitation. The holographic projection flickered, an unstable feed from the ancient archives, looping the same impossible moment. The sphere, the light, the annihilation. Gromnak's neural interface still burned. The static had seared itself into his synapses, a phantom pain that no diagnostic could erase. He could still hear it, the voice from the recording, not a transmission, not a signal, a presence, and now the humans had sent one of their own. A single vessel. Vorgul's voice was a blade wrapped in velvet. "Run the calculations again." Gromnak didn't need to. He had already done so, 12 times. The results were irrefutable. The energy signature, the dimensional harmonics, even the way the human construct moved. It matched the archives with a precision that defied coincidence. But the commander's order was law. His talons danced across the console, pulling fresh data streams into the analysis matrix. The numbers screamed the same truth. "Commander," Gromnak said, his voice hollow, "there is no error. The human vessel is a perfect match, down to the quantum resonance patterns." Vorgul's crest spines twitched, a micro-expression of fury, quickly suppressed. His species had ruled the void for millennia. They had crushed empires, broken fleets, erased civilizations that dared challenge their supremacy. And yet, here was a relic of something older, something that had made the Hollow Ones, the demons of their oldest nightmares, flee. And the humans had replicated it. A chime echoed through the deck. The tactical officer's voice was tight. "Commander, the human vessel is altering course." Vorgul turned. The holographic display shifted, zooming in on the lone sphere drifting through the void. It wasn't accelerating. It wasn't maneuvering. It was simply adjusting, tilting, ever so slightly, as if observing them in turn. Gromnak's blood ran cold. That wasn't standard navigation. That was recognition. The sphere pulsed once, softly, and a ripple of distorted space. Time flared around it. The Void Reaper's sensors shrieked in protest, their readings spiraling into chaos. For a single, heart-stopping moment, the entire ship lurched, as if the universe itself had twisted around them. Then, silence. The sphere hung there, unmoving. Vorgul's claws dug into the command console, leaving deep gouges in the alloy. His mind raced through strategies, contingencies, battle formations. But none of them accounted for this. How did one wage war against something that had erased the Hollow Ones with a whisper? Gromnock's neural interface flared again. This time, it wasn't static. It was a signal, raw, unfiltered, bleeding through every frequency at once. A voice, not human, not machine, but something else, sliced into his mind like a scalpel. You are not the ones we remember. The deck lights flickered and went dark. Darkness swallowed the void Reaper. For 3 heartbeats, the only sound was the ragged breathing of the bridge crew, their silver, purple armor glinting faintly in the emergency lighting that struggled to activate. Vorgul's secondary eyelids snapped shut, then open again, his pupils dilating to absorb every shred of ambient light. The sphere still hung outside the viewport, its surface now swirling with fractal patterns, like a storm contained within glass. Gromnock's neural tendrils spasmed, his cranial interface sparking as the alien signal burrowed deeper. The words weren't just heard, they were felt, vibrating in the marrow of his bones. You are not the ones we remember. Not a threat, a disappointment. Vorgul's claws flexed, his tactical mind, honed by decades of crushing rebellions and purging lesser species, scrabbled for purchase. This wasn't a foe to be outmaneuvered or outgunned. This was something that had watched empires rise and fall like tides. A new light, a single piercing blue, white flare erupted from the sphere. It wasn't an attack, it was a beacon. A holographic projection flickered into existence above the command, Dace resolving into a human figure. Colonel Victoria Vala stood before them, her image rendered in perfect, unsettling clarity. She wore no helmet, her dark hair pulled into a severe knot, her eyes the cold gray of a blade left too long in the void. Behind her, the shadows of her ship's bridge stretched endlessly, lined with consoles that hummed with a technology the Vorthak couldn't parse. Sleek, where theirs was brutal, organic where theirs was angular. She didn't speak, not at first. Her gaze swept over them, lingering on Vorgul's scarred carapace, on Gromnock's trembling neural array. When she finally opened her mouth, her voice was calm, measured, and utterly, terrifyingly human. You dug too deep. Gromnock's tendrils jerked. The archives, the warnings, the demons of their oldest myths. The pieces locked together with a click that echoed in his skull. The humans hadn't found the Hollow One's killer. They were it. The projection shifted behind Vala. The shadows coalesced into a new shape, a towering armored figure, its visor a single slit of crimson. Corporal Mitchell Sullivan, his war machine frame, humming with restrained power. His presence alone made the Vorthak's combat instincts scream. This wasn't a soldier, this was a predator. Vala tilted her head just slightly. You've been hunting ghosts, but we've been waiting. The sphere pulsed again, and the void. Reaper's engines died. Every system, every weapon, every thruster gone. The ship was a corpse in the void, held in place by something that laughed at the laws of physics. Vorgul's mandibles clicked in a snarl, but his blood ran cold. This wasn't a battle. It was a reckoning section, Faye. The pull, the silence was worse than any scream. Vorgul's claws flexed against the command console, the metal groaning under his grip. The void, Reaper hung motionless in the void, its silver, purple energy cores dark, its weapon arrays lifeless. The ship's neural network, the very pulse of its being, had been severed in an instant. No alarms, no dying flicker of systems, just nothing, like the galaxy itself had taken a breath and held it across the bridge. Gromnock's tendrils coiled tight against his carapace, his violet eyes locked on the holographic projection of the human commander. Vala stood unmoved, her expression unreadable, but the thing behind her, Sullivan, radiated a presence that made the air hum. His war machine frame was a grotesque fusion of armor and weaponry, every joint thrumming with latent energy, every motion too precise, too wrong for something that had once been flesh. The sphere between them pulsed again, a slow, rhythmic throb like a heartbeat. Vorgul's mandibles twitched. He had commanded fleets. He had shattered worlds. But this was something older. Something that slithered between the stars long before the Vorthak had clawed their way to dominance. Gromnock's voice was a rasp, barely audible. The archives, they called it the pull. A memory surfaced fragments of ancient texts, warnings etched in the blood of dead civilizations. The pull was the first sign, the moment the demon stilled the sky before the slaughter. Vala tilted her head, just slightly. You've spent centuries digging up corpses, thinking you were hunting monsters. Her lips curled, not quite a smile. But you never stopped to ask, why were the graves so empty? The sphere's glow intensified, a vibration that shuddered through the void, Reaper's hull, through the marrow of every Vorthak on board. It wasn't a noise. It was a presence, a thing that slithered into the mind and coiled there, whispering in a language older than speech. Sullivan's visor flickered crimson, and the ship moved, not under its own power, not by any force the Vorthak understood. The void Reaper lurched, its massive frame wrenched sideways, as if caught in an invisible current. The stars outside the viewport blurred, stretched, then snapped back into place as the ship settled into a new position, facing Earth. Gromnock's tendrils spasmed. They're not just killing us, his voice cracked. They're taking us. Vorgul's combat instincts howled. Every system was dead, every weapon silenced. The humans hadn't just disabled the ship, they had claimed it. And now, like prey caught in the jaws of some cosmic predator, the Void Reaper was being dragged toward the one place the Vorthak had never dared approach, the cradle of the demons. The sphere pulsed one final time, and the hologram of Vala dissolved into static, her last words hanging in the air like a verdict. Welcome home. Section Fae. The offer the void, Reaper drifted in the abyss, its once proud silhouette now a broken thing, cradled in the unseen grip of human technology. The bridge was silent, save for the erratic flicker of dying consoles, their silver-purple luminescence guttering like the last breaths of a dying beast. Vorgul stood motionless, his armored plates rigid with tension, his claws flexing against the command console, as if he could tear reality itself apart to escape. But there was no escape. The humans had not just defeated them. They had rewritten the rules of engagement. The sphere that had disabled the void, Reaper still hovered at the center of the bridge, inert now, its surface dull and lifeless. Yet its presence was a mockery, a reminder that the Vorthak's brutal, weapon-steel empire meant nothing here. Gromnock's tendrils twitched as he studied the readouts, his mind racing through possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. The humans had moved the ship without engines, without propulsion, without physics, as the Vorthak understood it. The implications were monstrous. "They've bound us to their will," Gromnock murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of failing systems. Like a beast on a leash, Vorgul's mandibles clenched. He had faced death before, had carved his way through a dozen battlefields, had watched enemies crumble beneath the might of Vorthak steel. But this was not war. This was theater. The humans had not even deemed them worthy of a proper fight. A chime cut through the silence. The sphere flared to life once more, its surface rippling like liquid mercury before resolving into the holographic image of Colonel Vala. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable behind the opaque visor of her helmet. The silence stretched, deliberate, oppressive. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, measured. "Commander Vorgul." Vorgul's spines flared in instinctive aggression, but he forced himself still. "You have our ship," he growled. "Our weapons. What more do you want?" Vala tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "Not what," she said. "Who?" The hologram shifted, expanding to reveal another figure, a Vorthak. But not one Vorgul recognized. His armor was older, its edges worn, the sigils of a long-dead war clan etched into the plating. His eyes burned with a cold, knowing light. Gromnock recoiled. That's Commander Karoth, Vala supplied. Last survivor of the 7th Voidborn Legion. The one your people left to die in the Scourge Wars. Vorgul's blood ran cold. Karoth had been a legend, a warrior who had defied the High Command, who had refused to abandon a doomed world. The archives said he had perished with his crew, swallowed by the abyss. But here he stood, alive. You took him. Vorgul realized. Vala's helmet tilted again. We saved him. Karoth stepped forward, his voice a rasp of old pain and older fury. The humans offered me a choice. Vorgul, to die forgotten, or to live and remember. His gaze locked onto Vorgul's. Now they offer you the same. The bridge seemed to shrink around them, the weight of the moment pressing down like a collapsing star. Vorgul looked at the hologram, then at the dead consoles, then at the stars beyond the viewport, stars that no longer belonged to the Vorthak. The humans had not just beaten them, they had given them a lesson, and now they were offering a choice. Surrender, or be erased. Section Fe. The silence on the bridge was absolute, save for the faint hum of the human warship's engines vibrating through the deck. Vorgul's claws flexed against the command console, the metal groaning under the pressure. His mind raced, caught between instinct and revelation. The implications were staggering. The High Command had declared him dead, another martyr in the endless wars against the Scourge. But the humans had done the impossible. They had plucked him from the void. Gromnock's voice was a whisper, barely audible. The archives spoke of the Scourge consuming entire fleets. No one survives that. Vala's helmet tilted slightly, the black visor reflecting the dim violet glow of the Vorthak consoles. No one else did. A shudder ran through the bridge crew. The humans had not just defied the odds, they had rewritten them. Vorgul's gaze flicked to the hologram still hovering between them. The image of Karoth's ship, broken and adrift, swallowed by the Scourge's advance. The humans had gone into that storm, and they had come back with a ghost. Karoth stepped forward, his movements slow, deliberate. His armor was different now. Sleek, reinforced with human alloys, the edges lined with faint blue circuitry. But his eyes, those were still Vorthak, still burning with the same fire that had once made him a legend. You think the High Command didn't know? Karoth's voice was rough, like steel dragged over stone. They left us to die because it was easier than admitting they couldn't win. Vorgul's mandibles tightened. He had heard the whispers, the rumors of commanders abandoning outposts to save their own hides. But to hear it confirmed by him, and the humans, Vorgul growled. What do they gain from this? Karoth's gaze didn't waver. They don't leave their own behind. A cold realization settled over Vorgul. The humans hadn't just saved Karoth out of pity. They had done it because that was what they did, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. And now they were offering the same to him: surrender, or be erased for the first time in his life. Vorgul felt the foundations of his world crack. The High Command's lies, the Scourge's inevitability, the human's supposed weakness, all of it shattered. Beyond the viewport, the human warship loomed, its hull gleaming under the distant starlight. Not a brute force conqueror, not a reckless invader, a predator that had just shown its teeth. And Vorgul finally understood. This wasn't a battle, it was a reckoning. Section Fe. The sacrifice play. The command deck of the Iron Resolve hummed with a tension thicker than the void outside. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his chair, the dark steel groaning under his grip. His mind raced, replaying Karoth's words like a shattered transmission looping in his skull. They don't leave their own behind, a concept so alien it burned. The Vorthak Dominion had thrived on ruthless efficiency. Weakness was purged, expendable assets were expended. Survival was a calculus, not a creed. Yet here stood humanity, offering salvation to those who had sought their annihilation. On the tactical display, the human warship dominated the projection, its silhouette a jagged monolith against the starfield. Its armor bore the scars of battle, but its energy signatures pulsed steady and strong. No panic, no retreat, just resolve. Gromnock's voice cut through the silence, his spines twitching with unease. High Commander, the Scourge fleet is entering engagement range. Their signatures match the archives, exactly as the humans warned. Vorgul's mandibles tightened. The Scourge, the ancient nightmare, the Dominion had dismissed the human warnings as deception, as weakness. But the data flooding the screens now was undeniable. Swarms of biomechanical horrors, their silver-purple energy cores flickering like dying stars, advanced in perfect predatory unison, and between them and Vorthak space, a single human vessel. Colonel Vala's image flickered onto the comms, her face unreadable beneath the scarred plating of her combat helm. "This is your last chance, Commander. Fall back, or stand with us." A growl built in Vorgul's chest. Stand with them? The Dominion did not stand with lesser species. It conquered. It ruled. The Scourge's lead ships unleashed their first volley. Beams of corrupted violet energy lanced toward the human warship. The iron resolve shuddered as its shields flared, dispersing the attack in cascading ripples. But the humans didn't return fire. Gromnock's claws trembled over the console. "They're not engaging? Why aren't they?" Then Vorgul saw it. The human ship wasn't just weathering the assault. It was baiting the Scourge, drawing them into a kill box along the edges of the tactical display. Faint signatures flickered, human stealth drones lying in wait, and the iron resolve was standing right in the middle of it. Vala's voice crackled again, colder this time. "You wanted to see what humanity fights for. Watch closely." The Scourge swarm descended, their formations tightening like a noose. Then, the void screamed. From the human ship's flanks, a storm of railgun rounds erupted, each projectile a hypersonic spear of tungsten. The lead Scourge vessels detonated in silent blossoms of molten debris, but the humans didn't stop. Secondary batteries fired, plasma lances carving through the swarm like a blade through flesh. Then came the missiles, their warheads flaring with the telltale distortion of localized Singularity cores. Space itself rippled as the explosions tore through the Scourge ranks, their ships collapsing inward like crushed insects. Vorgul's breath stalled. This wasn't warfare, this was annihilation, and the humans had done it with one ship. Gromnock's voice was barely a whisper. They're not just fighting, they're erasing them." Vorgul's claws dug deeper into the armrest. The Dominion had called humanity reckless, primitive, weak. This was the fury of a species that had stared into the abyss and laughed. The comms crackled one last time. Vala's voice was calm. "Final. Your move, Commander." Outside, the Scourge fleet burned, and Vorgul made his choice. Section Fey. The echo, the silence that followed, was heavier than the void itself. Vorgul's command deck was frozen. Every Vorthak officer locked in place, their silver-purple optics flickering between the tactical display and the lone human warship, drifting amidst the wreckage of the Scourge. The enemy fleet, once an unstoppable tide, was now nothing more than twisted metal and dissipating plasma, their remains still glowing with the residual heat of their destruction. The Indomitable floated untouched. No, not untouched. Gromnock's claws trembled as he scrolled through the battle data. The numbers made no sense. The energy expenditure alone should have crippled a vessel of that size. The Singularity warheads should have destabilized its own systems. The plasma lances should have overloaded their capacitors. Yet the human ship remained, its dark hull unmarred, its weapons humming with readiness. Vorgul's mandibles clenched. He had seen war. He had fought in the Dominion's most brutal campaigns, had watched entire systems burn under the might of the Vorthak war machine. But this was something else. This was efficiency. A single warship had done what entire battle groups could not. And now it waited. Not for reinforcements, not for orders. The realization settled like a blade between his ribs. The humans had not come to prove their strength. They had come to demonstrate something far more terrifying: precision. Every shot, every maneuver, every second of that battle had been calculated. They had not just defeated the Scourge, they had measured them, dissected their tactics, and then dismantled them with surgical brutality. And now they watched, just as they had watched the Dominion for decades. Gromnok's voice was hollow. The archives. Vorgul turned. The scientist's posture was rigid, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically. What of them? Gromnok hesitated, then pulled up an ancient data fragment, a recovered relic from the Dominion's earliest wars. The image was grainy, distorted by time, but unmistakable, brutal in its simplicity. The Scourge weren't the first, Gromnok whispered. They were the last. The words struck like a railgun round. The Dominion's oldest myths spoke of a forgotten enemy, a species so relentless, so adaptive, that they had waged war across the stars, not for conquest, not for resources, but simply because they refused to die. The archives called them demons, harbingers of the void, and now they had returned, not as legends, not as ghosts, but as soldiers. Vorgul's gaze returned to the indomitable. Vala's silence was deliberate. She was giving him time to understand, time to remember. His claws flexed. The Dominion had spent centuries erasing the past, burying the truth beneath layers of propaganda and pride. But humanity had not forgotten, and now they stood before him, not as supplicants, not as victims, but as the inheritors of a war older than his civilization. The comms crackled. Vala's voice was calm. You see it now, don't you? Vorgul exhaled. The Scourge had not been the enemy. They had been the prey and humanity. They were the hunters. The war room of the Indomitable was nothing like the brutalist command centers of the Vorthak Dominion, where their chambers were angular fortresses of gunmetal and violet energy conduits. This space was a relic of human pragmatism, cold, efficient, yet somehow alive. The walls bore the scars of past battles, hastily repaired, but never erased, as if the ship itself wore its history with pride. Vorgul stood rigid, his armored plates shifting uneasily. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something organic, human. It unsettled him in ways he couldn't articulate. Across the holotable, Colonel Vala waited, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp. She had not offered him a seat. This was not a negotiation, it was a reckoning. Behind her, Corporal Sullivan leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but the way his fingers tapped against his bracer, slow, rhythmic, spoke of controlled tension, a predator's patience. Gromnok, ever the scientist, was already studying the data streams flickering across the display. His mandibles twitched as he parsed the information, his mind racing to reconcile myth with reality. The archives had spoken of demons, of a force that burned worlds not for conquest, but for survival. And now they stood among them. Vala finally broke the silence. You've seen the records, not a question. A statement. Vorgul's claws flexed. Fragments, legends. His voice was rougher than he intended. The Dominion purged most of them. A flicker of something dark passed through Vala's gaze. Convenient, Gromnok interjected, his voice thin with disbelief. The Scourge. They weren't the aggressors. Sullivan let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Oh, they were, just not the way your histories tell it. The holotable flared to life, projecting a star map older than Vorthak civilization. Worlds burned, fleets shattered, and at the center of it all, a silhouette twisted and relentless. The Scourge, but not as conquerors, as fugitives. Vala's finger traced a path across the map. They ran from us, from Earth. Her voice was calm, almost detached. We didn't chase them for revenge. We chased them because they left no choice. Vorgul's spine stiffened. The implications were staggering. The Scourge, The monsters that had haunted Vorthak nightmares for generations had been running. From humans, Gromnok's mandibles clicked rapidly. But your technology, your ships, they were primitive. The archives said. The archives lied. Sullivan's voice cut through like a blade. Or maybe they just didn't understand. We don't fight with the biggest guns. We fight with the last gun, the one that fires when everything else is gone. The holotable shifted, displaying schematics of the Indomitable's core. Not a reactor, a singularity, Gromnok recoiled. That's impossible. You can't contain. We can. Vala's smile was razor thin. And we have. Vorgul felt the weight of centuries of arrogance collapse around him. The Dominion had dismissed humanity as reckless, as impulsive. But they had missed the truth. Humans didn't fight to win. They fought to end wars. And now, after millennia, the hunters had returned. Not as demons, as judgment. Section Fey. The new rule, the silence in the command chamber, was absolute. The silver-purple glow of the holotable cast jagged shadows across the Vorthak's armored faces, their spines rigid with primal terror. The schematics of the Indomitable's core pulsed before them, a contained singularity, a defiance of physics, a declaration of human will carved into the fabric of reality itself. Vorgul's claws flexed against the console, the dark steel surface groaning under the pressure. His mind raced through centuries of Dominion doctrine. Every tactical axiom, every unshakable truth of Vorthak supremacy, now reduced to ash. The humans hadn't just matched their technology. They had redefined it. Gromnok's mandibles trembled, his scientific certainty unraveling. The containment fields stabilizing the singularity weren't brute force energy barriers. They were alive. Nanofilament webs, woven from adaptive quantum algorithms, shifting and self-repairing in real time. It wasn't engineering. It was biology. Human ingenuity had blurred the line between machine and organism, creating a system that evolved under stress. Vala watched them, her stance relaxed, but her eyes like flint. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The truth was written in the way the Vorthak's warriors now hesitated, their weapon arms twitching toward their sidearms, but never quite drawing. The Dominion had spent millennia as the galaxy's apex predators. Now, for the first time, they faced something worse. Not demons, Vorgul thought. The realization bitter as poison. Something far colder. Sullivan stepped forward, his combat boots silent on the deck. He didn't raise his rifle. He didn't have to. The Dominion scanners had already cataloged the implants beneath his skin. The same fractal pattern nanites humming in the Indomitable's veins. Every human soldier was a node in the system, a living weapon, a contingency. You thought we were reckless, Sullivan said, his voice low. But recklessness implies you don't know the cost. We've always known. The holotable flickered, projecting a new feed, a grainy, ancient recording from the Vorthak's own archives. A battlefield, a world burning, and there, amidst the ruins, human figures standing over the corpses of Vorthak warriors, their armor cracked open like eggshells. The date stamp was millennia old. Gromnok's breath hissed through his vents. The Purge Wars, Vala nodded. Your people called us demons, but we weren't the ones who started that war. We just finished it. Vorgul's spines flattened against his back. The Dominion's history spoke of the Purge Wars as a righteous cleansing, a necessary culling of a dangerous species. But the humans remembered differently, and now, with the Indomitable Singularity core humming in the void above them, the past wasn't just history, it was a promise. The chamber's lighting shifted as the ship's power systems cycled, the silver-purple glow deepening to an ominous violet. The Indomitable wasn't just a warship, it was a statement. A single vessel, alone against an empire, because humanity had learned long ago that they didn't need numbers. They needed only one rule: never let the war come home again. And now, after centuries of silence, the humans had returned to enforce it. Section Fe, the weight of memory, the violet glow of the indomitable Singularity core, pulsed like a slow, deliberate heartbeat, casting jagged shadows across the command chamber. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrests of his chair, the metal groaning under the pressure. The air tasted of ozone and something else. Something old, something human. Gromnock's data slate lay abandoned on the console, its screen frozen on the archival image of a human warship from the Purge Wars. The design was different, cruder, less refined, but the intent was unmistakable. Even then, they had built not for war, but for annihilation. Vala stood at the center of the chamber, her silhouette framed by the holographic projection of the Indomitable's weapon schematics. The ship's armor wasn't just layered. It was alive, a self-repairing lattice of nanofiber and adaptive alloys that hardened in response to damage. The railguns weren't mere kinetic accelerators. They were spinal, mounted monstrosities capable of punching through planetary crusts. And the Singularity core, Gromnock's mandibles twitched. You weaponized a black hole. Vala didn't turn. Weaponized implies we built it for destruction. We didn't. We built it to survive. A cold understanding settled over Vorgul. The Dominion's history spoke of the humans as reckless, violent, a species that burned itself out in endless conflict. But the truth was worse. They hadn't burned out. They had learned. The Indomitable wasn't just a warship. It was a relic of a war so brutal, so absolute that humanity had reshaped itself to ensure it would never happen again. Mitchell shifted beside Vala, his fingers brushing the sidearm at his hip. The motion was instinctive, unconscious, a soldier's habit. Vorgul's gaze lingered on the weapon. Compact, efficient, its casing worn from use. It wasn't ceremonial, it was practical. That was the true horror. The humans hadn't come to conquer. They hadn't come to negotiate. They had come to demonstrate. A single ship, a single warning. The Dominion had spent centuries believing itself the apex of galactic power. But now, faced with the Indomitable, Vorgul felt the weight of a truth his people had long forgotten. There were older, darker things in the universe, and they remembered everything. The hologram flickered as the Indomitable's core cycled higher, its energy signature spiking. The deck plates hummed beneath their feet, a deep resonant vibration that shuddered through bone and metal alike. Vala finally turned, her eyes locking onto Vorgul's. "You have a choice," she said, her voice quiet. "Stand down, or remind the galaxy why your ancestors called us demons." The silence that followed was heavier than the void itself. Outside, the stars burned cold and indifferent,